What we do in the out of the lab sessions is we take a target audience, policymakers in this case, and then we look at it from three sides. One is a scientist that's actually successfully doing the communication with this audience at the moment. That's why we invited Caitlin. And the second side we're taking is a researcher that studies this communication. So that looks at how is this communication between institutes, between academics and policy making, how is that actually done as her or his study subject. And for that we invited Paul Diederen from the Rathenau, Dr. Paul Diederen from the Rathenau Institute, whom I'd like to give the floor to talk about his work. Paul.
Thank you.
Clicker is...
Let's see whether this works. All right. Yes, you can hear me. Kijk, dit is klikken. Okay. Hello, everybody. Let's see. I don't run. I don't climb. But I'm a living person, just as Caitlin is. And I will talk about the whole issue of this afternoon from a little bit different side. I'll try to tell you something about the perspective of the receiving end, policymaker. And well, I'm just to introduce myself briefly. I'm a research coordinator at the Rathenau Institute. The Rathenau Institute is a policy research institute under the Royal Academy here in the Netherlands. And we look at the relationship between technological change and society. We mainly work for ministries and for the Dutch Parliament. So I'll be looking at what policymakers make of research. As you all know, research, of course, is just one ingredient to the whole policy process. And this is sometimes frustrating to a researcher. You think, well, I know how things work, and so it's clear what policy should do. But policymakers have all kinds of other ingredients to the policy process, like political considerations, interests, prior knowledge, agreements, etc. So research is only one ingredient to policy, and research is a certain specific type of knowledge. It looks backward. Research is mostly about what has happened, and policy is about what is going to happen. So it is necessarily only part of the story. Caitlin talked about researchers taking the initiative to talk to policymakers or to talk to politicians. I'll be talking about something else, mostly the context between researchers and policymakers in this country is in a different context. It's in the context where policymakers procure research. And this is about a couple of tens of millions of euros every year. Every government department has a budget to procure research, to procure knowledge. And mostly this is done from public research institutes, from what we call planning bureaus, from advisory councils. We have a whole system of advisory councils in this country. And of course there are private consultants also, and then also there are universities. So universities also provide the Dutch government with knowledge. The question for this afternoon, the question that Rolf put to me is, what should you as a researcher know to successfully communicate your research? I'm not going to tell you how to communicate. You have heard a lot of this about how to do this from Kidlip. She has given you a number of lessons. I will give you a bit of background information, or at least I'll try to give you some background information. So I want to spend a little bit of time on issues that you keep in the back of your mind when you're presenting research to policymakers. And I want to talk about two things. One is about, I want to talk a little bit about what knowledge is. And the other thing that I want to talk about is what interests are. And these topics have been figuring in research that we have been doing. So what I'm saying is based on our experiences in our research. So knowledge, what is knowledge? I think it's, that you can say that knowledge is made up out of two things. Knowledge, like you write in your research papers or in your reports, that's mostly information. Information is empirics, it's facts, it's figures, it's the research outcomes. You've been running your model and something comes out, and that's what you write down, and that's what you give to the policymaker, and you say, well, this is what came out of my research. Please use it. But if you and I are talking about knowledge, knowledge is not only information in a report. Your knowledge is mainly between your ears. It's in your head. Your knowledge is also in your fingers when you know what to do. And it's in your heart. It's your motivation. So knowledge is much more than information. Knowledge is what I have called here expertise. It's your insights. It's the way you comprehend the world. It's based on your experience, and to a large extent it is tacit. It's not something that you can write down immediately. You know much more than you can say. So knowledge is also a capacity. It's a capacity to give meaning to facts, to give meaning to information. So the knowledge is a combination of the two. On the one hand, it's the things that you can write down. On the other hand, it's your expertise. So why do I say this? What you see over the last, let's say, 30 years, that is that in policy circles, knowledge has become more and more commodified. What is commodification? It is more and more a commodity that you can trade or that you can own. A commodity is something that is, you can touch it. So knowledge has been to a large extent reduced to the part that you can touch, which is the information in the reports and the information in the papers, the explicit information. We have been commodifying lots of things over the last 30 years. We have been commodifying care, we have been commodifying education, we have been commodifying nature, we have been commodifying all kinds of public services. And if you commodify something, you can trade it and you can organize a market for it. And this market helps to link supply and demand. So we have done this also with knowledge. We have, for instance, we have put our research institutes at arm's length. They are not part of the government anymore, but they are independent organizations that produce knowledge. And the government has a budget to buy this knowledge. And there is a contract that you, as a research institute, you deliver knowledge. This is an example, the consequence of this commodification of knowledge. Another consequence of the commodification of knowledge is that the human resources policy of departments has changed. If the idea is that knowledge can be bought, and it can be bought off the shelf even, then you don't have to own a lot of knowledge yourself. You can just buy it. So you see over the last 30 years that in government the skills of the people that work there are not so centered upon being able to deal with knowledge, but rather being able to deal with information and to buy that and to have generic skills. And furthermore, this commodification of knowledge, the reduction to information, has led to an increasing trust in, or increasing idealization of evidence-based policy, where evidence is information. So, in general, in Dutch government, we strive to have evidence-based policy, policy based on solid, scientifically validated information. So, information is, of course, very important as a basis for policy, but it's not value-free. So the information that you research, that you find, is guided in some way by the things, your prior assumptions about it, the prior assumptions about what is important in the world. It's usually incomplete, inconclusive, and especially if we are talking about the bigger changes in society, it's seldom that research can give you the answer to what you should do. We are looking in the Netherlands towards a number of transitions. The transitions in energy, the transitions in healthcare, transitions in innovation policy. And these transitions are really system changes that you're aiming for. There is hardly any research that can give you any guidance to how to do that. So the idea that information can help you decide what to do is very shaky. What's needed besides the information is the expertise, the insights, the tacit knowledge, which in the present circumstances, such as our observation and our research, has been sort of neglected. And that is where the researcher and his communication capacities come in. The communication about research is not usually about the information part. It is about helping the policymaker to go through the meaning of the facts and to clarify those, to go into the questions of why, what does this research really say about the issues that we are talking about. So this is what I wanted to say about what knowledge is, the difference between information and expertise. Let's briefly say something about interest. It's important to realize that the policymakers and researchers have different interests, obviously. People describe it to me as policymakers are either sharks or bears. The bears, they hug the researcher because they love him and they want the researcher. But the sharks are the ones that try to defend the interests, the political interests of the minister, and are not really interested in the, not so much interested in the truth as well in how it fits in the policy program of the minister. So it's important to realize that there are different interests on the side of the policymakers. And on the side of the researchers, obviously there are also different interests. It's reputation. You don't want to spoil your reputation when you do research for the government. But of course you're also interested in the budget. In some sense, you sort of need to please the policymaker, because otherwise you won't get the next request for research in the next round. And your publications are also important. So there is a tension between the interests of both the researchers and the policymakers. Then the question is how to structure the relationship between the two. And there you see that it is necessary to have a sort of a balance between distance and proximity. Distance is important because as a researcher you need to be independent. It should be your choice to choose a methodology, and your scientific rigor is your main responsibility. But nearness is also important if you do research for the government. First of all, you want the right research question. And to find the right research question is usually very difficult, because often you get a research question, but you don't really understand why they put this question to you, and it takes quite a lot of talking to the policymaker to find out why he poses this research question. What is he going to do with the answer? Why does he want to know this? Is this need to know, or is it nice to know? So this is an important discussion very often. What is this? What is the question all about? Sometimes it's half of the research project. Access to resources is also very important usually, and more research for the government is done with the government. There is an aspect of co-creation, and they are the ones that have a lot of information. They have access to the right people, access to the right data, and so cooperation is an element in the research. Depends, of course, on the type of research that you're doing, but often you cooperate with the policymakers. And then nearness is also important if you really want to have impact. And this is what research for government is often about. It's not only to find the truth and to add to the stock of knowledge. It's about impact, which means the right timing, which means the right framing, which means the right language, the right contextualization. As a researcher, you're looking to find the right balance between nearness, proximity, and distance. And you want to maintain your independence and your integrity. And in all kind of stages of your research process, this might be jeopardized, or there might be things to look at. First of all, there is agenda setting and programming, and it's very important to be taking your own role as a researcher, if it's about the interpretation of the questions and the delineation of what you're going to do research on. I came across an example where an institute was asked to do research on the increase of the maximum speed of traffic on the Dutch highways from 120 to 130. And the researchers said, well, okay, what are the effects going to be? And the question put to them is, tell us where on the Dutch highway system we can increase from 120 to 130. The question was not, what is the extra pollution going to be and how many more casualties can we expect if we increase the speed? The researchers were not allowed to research these questions. They were only allowed to research the question, where can you technically increase the speed? It's a matter of maintaining your independence to have a say on the delimitation of what you're researching. It's a sort of responsibility of the researcher. Another thing is sometimes they ask you to do irrelevant research. Research is sometimes used in a very opportunistic way. They ask you to do research to postpone a decision. I've seen cases of that coming by also. Well, we don't know what we're going to decide politically, you know, let's not have this discussion at this moment. Maybe we can do another research and get some more information on the options. There is a question for a researcher, an independent researcher. Should I do that? Or how should I talk about my policymakers about issues like that? Independence is also an issue when you're executing your research, you're doing the research, because often you communicate during the research process with the policymakers about what you're doing. There are supervisory committees that look at intermediate products and talk to you, and you can be steered there too by limiting budgets, by limiting time, by refusing to cooperate or limiting access to data. These are things to be aware of and to talk about, to discuss. Drawing conclusions, here it's also important to be aware of your separate roles as a policymaker or as a researcher. The role of the researcher is to draw scientific conclusions and not to draw the conclusions about what should be done, because there are other elements in political decision making besides research that come into the equation. So there it's very important to keep your role. And finally, there is the issue of dissemination of research results, the timing of publication, and the way they are being disseminated. Who is writing the press release, things like that. Most institutes have some provisions to maintain this balance between distance and proximity, and to maintain this certain independence while cooperating and interacting closely. And there are the hard provisions. They are the things that are written down in rules, or in code of conduct, the supervisory board, supervisory committees, peer review procedures, people that you can go to if things are getting out of hand, and of course, budgetary independence is an important one. A certain degree of budgetary independence, such that you're not cut off of financial means immediately if the research is not welcome. But we found out in talking to all kinds of people in research institutes that beside the rules on the left-hand side of this picture, there are the soft provisions also, which is more a matter of culture and a matter of awareness. And that has to do with sticking to your role as a researcher. Take responsibility for what the question of your research is and for the delineation of the issues. Talk about what your role is and what the role of the policymaker is. Make it clear what you expect of each other. have backup by having a supervisory committee looking at what is happening in the research, composed out of the different interests in society, and not only of business and policymakers, but maybe also of NGOs or just people in society that have an interest as a citizen in a project. We came across research organizations that worked with researchers on the one hand in a project that did the interface, that were the interface with the policymakers and talked to the policymakers, but also to keep a number of researchers at a distance from the policymakers, and only to go through the issues of what are the recommendations that come out of the research after a procedure of having also people that are at a distance consider what can you say on the basis of research. A diversified communication strategy. If you want to be a responsible researcher working for policy, there should be an openness and a transparency of your results. And it should be transparent not only to policymakers, but also to the general public. So have a communication strategy that also addresses the people that read newspapers. And be open about the uncertainties and in your research and the hypotheses that you use to do this research. I will keep it to that. Thank you.